there is a reality that has been there that is coming to the fore, that people are starting to realize. And it's not an encouraging reality. Whether it's the reality that the American president that was reelected by the American people is a buffoon, whether that's the reality that's coming to fore, a reality that many people thought to be true, other people thought couldn't possibly be true. And I believe that what we will see in November is a huge, what I call a blue slap, where people will vote blue, not because they believe in blue, but just because they want to put a cap on what the president can do by controlling both the Senate and the House. Yeah. Because they've come to the conclusion that the president isn't working in the best interest of the United States, maybe doesn't know how to run a country, and maybe is, in fact, out for his own legacy more so than the American dream, the American promise, the American ideals. If there are still Americans who even believe in those ideas. There are so many Americans right now that are just trying to survive. And when you're up against not being able to feed your kids versus parroting the American promise, the American dream, you're going to default to feeding your own kids, even if it means stealing bread from your neighbor, right? So we're in a very real place right now. It's fascinating to me that earlier in the conversation you said that you're anticipating, I'm not going to use the correct words, but 10 years before we kind of unfuck this mess.
No. Before we implode.
Before we implode.
The debt will blow up.
So you've given us this 10-year timeline. And what I find fascinating is completely separate from this conversation. I've been talking about the United States going through 10 very difficult years. And I've been talking about it for maybe 2 years now because of our ideological kind of fits right now, our ideological convulsions right now.
Between the left and the right?
Between ourselves, between what we all believe to be true about America, separate of politics, but what we believe to be true about justice and checks and balances and democracy and freedom of, you name it, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, trial in front of a panel of your peers, like everything we've ever believed about America has essentially been challenged and proven that there's a way around it in just the last 2 to 4 years. And the rise of the populist politician isn't something that we have to attribute to Donald Trump. It goes all the way back to Barack Obama. So we have these, just like you were saying, we've spawned a demon of the left and we've spawned a demon of the right. And the question is, how do we get back to a world where we aren't spawning demons? We don't have to spawn angels, but how do we get to a place where we're not pulling forth the most aggressive damnation, conflict-oriented, manipulative forces? How do we find a way back to checks and balances? How do we find a way back to inviting cordial conversation with different points of view, not just in front of a camera like this, but in front of, or like actually at the congressional floor? How do we get back to that? How do we stop encouraging extreme activity? Because we spent 20 years fighting extremists only to now essentially be radicalizing ourselves. And that's not in our best interest if we plan on maintaining our position as the world's wealthiest country and kind of the global leader. If we plan on giving up that role, we can do whatever the fuck we want. But if you want to keep that role, we have to make some very rapid corrections, because to my earlier point about money goes where money goes, wealthy people follow their money. And where they diversify their wealth, they also start to diversify their own security and their own safety. And one of the things that makes America so powerful is not just our wealthy indigenous Americans, it's all the wealth around the world that chooses to come here and invest in this economy and invest in this place, this property, this system. And if I'm a wealthy Malaysian, I'm looking at some other options right now besides just the United States to put my wealthy money.
Okay, you've asked the right question. Now, no vagaries. How do we get back into that place?
I don't know that America really wants to be back in that place. I'm frankly concerned that the vast majority of Americans have become so complacent and ignorant that they won't take the responsibility for the actions that they have to take. They won't seek peace with their neighbors. They won't let go of their political leanings. They won't take the time to research who's on the ballot before they vote. They won't change what they watch, whether it's Fox News or CNN. They are so ingrained in their behaviors that they're not going to change, which leaves all the change that we need to the younger generations. And younger generations historically lean very progressive. They lean to the left. They have big dreams and big ideologies, and they haven't had enough life experience to understand real risk. So what that means is that we will not have the grassroots change that we need. And what grassroots change does happen will be very progressive, very left-leaning, because it will be led by people who don't have a financial stake in the future of their own country. And then that's just going to spawn another counter effort to counter the left. And then we're right back in the same cycle where we are now. I would love to have an optimistic idea of the future of the United States. I just don't have it. I think the United States is going to go through a full generation of confusion and disarray, and a solution will either present itself that I can't imagine right now, or no solution will present itself, and we will decline as our competitors continue to grow. If you haven't discovered your secret spy superpower, then somebody else might be using theirs against you. CIA teaches us that there are only 3 types of people in the world: those who motivate, those who manipulate, and those who are being controlled by one of the other 2. I created a 3-minute CIA-style quiz to help you unlock your secret psychological advantage and identify your hidden blind spot. All you have to do is click on the first link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen, and you'll be taken directly to your private quiz. This test was developed to help you weaponize your natural-born gifts and use them to get ahead of 99% of people in power, wealth, and purpose. It was also designed to make sure that you can protect yourself against those who would use their skills against you. I want you to discover your secret spy superpower and use it for good before somebody else uses their power against you.
It's very clear. Now step into the theoretical for me for a second and assume that people will do the things, but they just need you to tell them what things to do.
Okay.
How would we, with a willing populace, how would we get ourselves out of this mess?
So there's a midterm election coming up that we would need to see record level voting on, especially because there's been so much political gerrymandering.
But what would you point them at? What should they vote for?
They should vote for the candidate that represents what they want for the future of the United States.
But you already laid out the world's most compelling argument for what I'll say is populism. People are thinking emotionally. They're on a team. So if we send them in to vote and just say, vote your conscience, as of right now today, even if they're willing, if they're pointed at just vote for what you think is right, they'll just be split right,
so
left.
that's why I'm not saying vote your conscience.
Okay.
I'm saying vote for the vision of the future that you want to see. And I say that because
how's that different?
Because the only certain politicians talk about a vision for the future. Most of them talk about what they're dissatisfied with right now. Even if you look at hate ads or attack ads, right? Attack ads are very focused on right now, look what's happened. This person isn't doing what you promised, isn't doing what they promised and doesn't believe in, freedom or democracy or whatever else. They're anti-immigration, they're pro whatever else. Like the list goes on and on about the here and the now. It's very rare that you come across somebody who is vision casting. Here's where I want us to go. I want us to find a way to work across the aisle. I want us to find a way to reinstate checks and balances. I want to find a way to make the Fed independent again. You don't hear people talk about that. If you find someone who is talking about that, it's almost guaranteed that they're not backed by big money, because the big money essentially forces them to back a certain horse or toe a certain party line. They're trying to pander to the religious voter. They're trying to pander to the Social Security voter. They're trying to pander to the healthcare voter. They're trying to pander to the LGBTQ voter. And it's very focused on emotion, not focused on issue and vision. So if you just focus on vision casting, 80% of the politicians that are out there are not going to be viable because they're not casting a vision. They're just backing a horse. But you have to actually research before you do that. You have to.
Can I name a candidate that I think I hear you describing and you tell me if I'm on?
If I know them, please.
Are we talking about JFK? Somebody who's like, we're going to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do. Are you talking about that kind of thing?
So I don't disagree with that. I think what we're seeing with those kinds of vision casting are he was already the president and he was getting public support for where he wanted us to go in terms of our public spending. I don't have a good politician that comes to mind that casts a vision right now. And I haven't seen one for a very long time at any level of government. But since we're going into a theoretical conversation, that's where I would say we would have to start. And if you're talking about people truly doing their civic duty, then when they don't find a candidate that speaks to the vision that needs to be cast, then they write to the candidate and they ask the candidate what their vision is. It used to be a very common thing for people to write their congressmen, write their senators, write their people who were running. They would go to town halls. They would ask questions of the incumbent that were meaningful and important to them. That time has changed. Now town halls are more of a political rally than anything else. But we have a chance to go back to that if we're willing to. Democracy was always meant to happen slowly. The fact that we've been able to take such rapid action, like capturing Maduro in January and then killing narco-terrorists in Mexico in February and then attacking Iran in March. The reason we can move so fast is because we've shortcut a lot of those democratic processes. And we have to find our way back to moving slow if we're going to trust democracy. If you don't want to trust democracy, that's fine. Don't trust it. But don't try to say that you trust it or that you believe in it if you're willing to let it be bypassed.
Okay, so we've got vision casting. So somebody that has a clear vision for the future and can tell us how that we're going to get there. Is there any other sort of major tent pole of how we get out of this?
What a good question. I'm sure that there have got to be a small handful. I just don't know what they are.
I don't know that many people will say the only answer that I think is actually true, and that's you have to fix the economy. And so I just wrote a deep dive on this. Populism is, by my definition, and I don't think anybody will give me a better one, but populism is when people begin reasoning via emotion, which is what humans do anyway, but it ratchets up. So the economy breaks, people become fearful. In the extreme, they're worried about where their next meal comes from. And that forces them to seek safety in numbers. So they join a team. Then they summon forth the strong man who tells them everything is going to be okay, gives them an enemy to focus on. And that sense of safety makes people do murderous things. And the utterly fascinating thing about the most famous rise of that kind is, of course, Hitler. And Hitler, when he came to power, ironically, I used to think that he came to power because of the Treaty of Versailles and the loss of World War I, but he actually didn't. So he started gaining in popularity during the 1923 hyperinflation. And so he got up to like 6% or 6.5% of the vote, but he was still like a super fringe character. It wasn't until the Great Depression. So he actually goes up to like 6%, 6.5% popularity, then falls back down in 1928 to 2.5%. So it's like, oh, he's kind of this washed up guy, right? And then the Great Depression hits and he goes from 2.5% popularity to like 37% in 5 years because 50% of youth was unemployed. 1 in 3 Germans were unemployed, full stop. I mean, it was just like complete pandemonium. And so then when you've got a guy who's like, not only do I know how to fix this, I know who the problem is. Yeah. And so that's populism. So we're in a populist moment and everybody's being very clear. If you're on the left, the right is the problem. If you're on the right, the left is the problem. Right now, 40% of Americans believe that the other side is morally bad. More than 50% of Americans think that their other fellow Americans are a threat to democracy or to the nation itself. I mean, it's like the stats are insane. And so we're in this populist moment, but everybody wants to treat the symptoms and not the cause. And the cause is the economic uncertainty. And even if you go back and look at Mao, same thing, Mao, economic uncertainty, Japan goes in and just completely fucks up China. Mao rises to power by winning the Civil War. Everybody's economically uncertain. He's like, don't worry, I got you. Proceeds to kill 45 million of them. But they keep following him, partly just because of the sheer tyranny. But he comes to power as a strongman. Same thing with Lenin, same thing with, what's his face that followed Lenin. I cannot believe I'm blanking on his name. One of the most evil people to ever walk the earth. Stalin, thank you. So it's first of all, they come in left and right flavors. And so everybody is going to bang the drum about Trump, and that's understandable because he's in power now. But if what we do is reject Trump and go to a Bernie figure, Mamdani, AOC, it's my particular bent is that is economically even worse. You've got sort of kleptocrats over here, but at least they create an opportunity for you to get rich while they steal from you. You won't take advantage of the opportunity, but it's there. The other side just steals from you. You don't have an opportunity to get ahead. You get breadlines. So look, they're both bad. I just think one is slightly worse than the other. But you definitely, if you cannot solve the economic problem, you will simply, in a ever escalating drama, swing from left to right and back again.
But I would argue that the average person can't fix the economic issues.
No, the average person can't fix the economic issues at all.
So then, yeah, how does the average person then participate in
you elect
fixing?
Margaret Thatcher? So
we're both going back to the root of participating intelligently in the electoral process.
Correct. The only thing you can do is get the obvious thing that people should be banging pots and pans about is Thomas Massey, the only guy wearing a debt clock pin, just got outed by AIPAC, which kids, your reputation is so bad. You are getting savaged. It's not like a small handful of people have turned against you. An entire generation or more has turned against you, and you go and do that fucking insanity. But anyway, they did it. And so we have to get candidates who are economically literate and then elect them. And then we have to deal with the fact that we're going to go through what Britain went through when Margaret Thatcher came into office. But she ended up pulling them through, getting to the other side and getting things back on track, going from we're the wealthiest nation in the world to begging the IMF for a bailout, only to actually rebuild and reestablish their wealth. It's an incredible journey. Now, they're not obviously what they used to be, but they got on the other side, at least briefly, with Margaret Thatcher. So we would have to go through something like that so that we can start making the economy work for the average person again. But the thing that drives me mad, is that the very thing that people vote for, which is more free stuff or bigger military or whatever it is that they're voting for, that causes deficit spending, it will be stolen from you in the form of inflation. And the fact that people it's just a bridge too far. You're never going to get people to understand that. I worry. I really hope I can. But I certainly worry that that's just people are too busy trying to stay afloat.
I hesitate to bring this up,
Please.
In large part because there's cameras on us, right? But also because it's just fraught with people misinterpreting it, right? But I have very seriously considered whether or not it's better to just give up on all the people who have already kind of given up on self-improvement, give up on people who've given up on learning, give up on people who it's a bridge too far to understand the impact of inflation.
How do you give up? What does it look like?
You just stop trying to educate them. And instead, you focus on the much smaller population, which according to the 80-20 rule is 20% of the population, that actually has the capacity, the interest, the ability to change their ways. Because if you give up on the 80% and you focus on the 20%, you're essentially accepting that the process of democracy, the majority rules idea, is no longer relevant. And instead, you kind of lean into the reality of the fact that a small group of people carry an outsized impact to the economy and to the world. And I say that because, like, even if you just look at this is a me problem, not a you problem. Maybe it is a you problem that we've never talked about before. But I would love to educate spy skills that break barriers. The 22-year-old who didn't go to college, who's, trying to figure out how to make life work in the same hometown where he went to high school, just as much as I would like to educate the 35-year-old who's already moved twice and who has an advanced degree and who's rising in his company. I would love to help them both. But the problem is they have very different lifestyles. They have very different challenges. They have very different priorities, right? The 22-year-old probably doesn't have kids, isn't married, still living in his hometown, doesn't have a perspective even outside of his state, where the 35-year-old who's moved multiple times might be married, might have their first child already, and certainly knows what it's like to kind of suck eggs a little bit to succeed in a career. This person I can exponentially help in just a short period of time, where this person takes convincing before I can ever actually help them. So when I choose how to spend my 3 hours of recording content today, isn't it more efficient for me to focus on this person who I can change more in a shorter period of time rather than spend part of my education and training time on this other person? And I say that in a true place of difficulty, because I've always been a public servant. When I was in the military, when I was at CIA, our job is to protect even the least of us. But now that I've learned a little bit about how the economy actually works, and I've been able to break through a financial barrier of my own that nobody in my family could ever break through, I have certainly seen the financial benefit of not focusing on a losing horse, but betting on a winning horse. And if we all did that, though, we'd be taken for a ride, right? Like, we would essentially be reinforcing the system that already exists.